behalf of the Vice Chancellor, I want to welcome all of you to this public lecture. Professor Moore, Deans, Directors, HODs, faculty members, students, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, we have gathered here to have a bite on how we can use Black liberation practices to advance international collaboration. Every university across the world strives on collaborations through faculty exchange programs, student exchange programs, research collaborations, etc. This topic is very relevant to us because we are of the Black race and want to see how Black liberation practices can foster or advance international collaborations. This morning, let's have a very expectant heart, open our minds to the lecture, and ask very relevant questions. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, I welcome all of you to this program and wish you very well and hope that we'll have a very successful intellectual discourse this morning. Thank you.
Black liberation, for me, holds to three anchors. First, freedom. Second, collectivism. And third, ancestral knowing, that together compels you to dismantle oppressive laws, practices, and ways of knowing and being in this world. Allow me to gently stir the waters of remembrance. May forgotten identities resurface. That we are driven by a sense of mysterious connection with one another. That our kind of breed is a gift to humanity. Humanity's rarest tapestry depicting true qualities. And so in the sage's gentle utterances, echoing with clarity as she astutely observes that my humanity is directly connected to your humanity. And so permit me to illuminate the pathways of ancient glories and may forgotten identities resurface. That beneath this dark melanin pigment lies a reservoir of hidden strengths and untapped potentials. That within the deep soils of Africa is where the Creator cooks his food and sends the whole world, and all of them have life. That the black skin is not a badge of shame. This is real sensation. You see, for this very discourse, let us discuss this in this way. This is the cause that our pursuit of external validation make us forget to behold the beauty that blooms in our own backyards. That our desire for external acceptance make us forget to behold the beauty of our own sunrise. Our tastes and preferences are accustomed to external horizons, overlooking the majesty of our own, within our own shores. We are a people whose perspectives, ideologies, and experiences are valuable and worth celebrating. We are a people whose customs and traditions are unlike any others. They are you see, our culture goes beyond what we have in Ghana to Nigeria to South Africa to Botswana, into our accents. We are rich, very rich in culture. A cultural tapestry woven from threads of diverse communities. And so with each step forward, there is a path we create, not for our own sakes, but for generations to take. And so in the light of the Professor Mori candidates, thank you for setting the pace. From here on, we count our days, not in the frustration of each delay, because we certainly won't lose this race when there is a factor called grace. Tell me, who dares get in the way? So tell them we are not lost. Tell them we have found our shores. Tell them we are coming stronger than before. Let it be known that we have weathered the storms, emerging stronger with our hearts no longer torn. We declare our triumph, our awakening, Black liberatory, our collective strength shining brighter than before. Thank you.
Very soon, the reason why we have waited so long is here. The reason Prof has traveled all the way from the United States to give us her nuggets of wisdom. But before then, let's have Dr. Ulu to give us a brief profile of Dr. Sorry, Professor Candace M.
Thank you. And Esther, thank you for that beautiful word. Well spoken. And your presentation was awesome. Let's do it for her. Yes. I'm super excited and very humbled to be called upon to introduce this distinguished academic who is making so much impact globally, Professor Candace M. Professor Candace M is a clinical professor of student affairs and a Harold R.W. Benjamin professor at the University of Maryland in US. She received a prestigious Fulbright U.S. Scholar Program Award from the U.S. Department of State to study in Ghana during the 2021-2022 academic year. Professor Moore is affiliated with the University of Maryland College of Education Center for Diversity and Inclusion in Higher Education, where she served as the inaugural director from 2017 to 2021. This research and consultation center provides expertise to universities across the country and worldwide on issues related to diversity, inclusion, and social justice in higher education. Professor Moore's scholarship promotes inclusive campus environments and fostering international collaboration in higher education. Her research interests include understanding Black identities, contingent faculty development in higher education, supporting student success at historically Black colleges and universities, and exploring culturally conscious pedagogy and practice in higher education. Her work is featured via the UMB University of Maryland's College of Education's 2025 X-Talk series, which I've listened to several times. It's on YouTube. You can also listen to it. But the takeaway for me from this X-Talk is that our humanity is directly connected to the humanity of others. And that you should not be afraid, regardless of the trouble that you find yourself. Just be kind. Because there is trouble all over the world. But remember that you are not alone. So please, go to YouTube and go and listen to it. It's so inspiring. Professor Candace Moore's international endeavors have resulted in ongoing international partnerships and study abroad efforts in West Africa, with colleagues from the University of Cape Coast in Ghana and Washington University, St. Louis. Professor Moore co-developed both a hybrid international cross-cultural graduate course on student affairs practice and a short-term study abroad program that explores student affairs practices in higher education in Ghana. The hybrid course is co-taught with faculty at the University of Cape Coast. Professor Moore's short-term study abroad program and most recent scholarship centers on decolonising pedagogical practices while expanding practice beyond Western ideals of social justice and education. The study abroad program was recognized with the American College Personnel Association's Outstanding International Educations Initiative Award in 2019. Please, let's clap for him. Ladies and gentlemen, with a hand of applause, please, let's welcome Professor Candace M. Moore to the podium. Let's hear it.
Good morning. Now, I grew up in the Black Southern Church, and call and response is very important, so I'm going to try it again. Good morning. There we are. We are here today. To all dignitaries, campus leaders, administrators, staff, faculty, students, and community members, I bring you greetings. It is truly my pleasure to join this public lecture on using Black liberatory practices to advance international collaborations. I'd like to first thank Professor Poku Mensah and Dr. Mrs. Mekwe for the invitation to join you today. It is my pleasure to also represent my professional home, the University of Maryland's College of Education, and thank my department chair and dean for their support. I'd like to acknowledge my first teachers and ancestors who have informed the lessons that I hold so dear. To my friends and family, I would not be here without you, and thank you. And of course, I'd incredibly be remiss if I did not pause and acknowledge my dear partner and husband, Mr. Thomas Moore, who is with us here today. While I am currently joining you today in present Accra, Ghana, West Africa, at UPSA, I'd like to acknowledge the ancestral lands of the people of the Gold Coast. As a member of the faculty at the University of Maryland in present-day College Park, Maryland, I acknowledge the stolen lands of the indigenous communities of the Piscataway people in Maryland. I give honor and I pay respect to the land where this knowledge and labor that informs my scholarship took place. I also acknowledge and bear witness to the enslaved labor and stolen identities of our African diasporic ancestors who sacrificed their bodies and blood across these so-called united lands. Their labor and their living shall not be in vain. Amen. Before we move forward, I'd like to explore Black liberation in the ways in which you've already heard today. But so that it is permeated in your mind, I must first situate myself as Lee Patel calls on all decolonizing scholars to do in relationship to the communities in which I partner with and choose to study with. My perspective is informed through African indigenous knowledge. More specifically, for the purposes of this talk, my comments and scholarship are in relation to Ghanaian indigeneity. Professor George Sefade describes African indigeneity as a powerful decolonial stance to investigate the possibilities of African indigenous knowledge. This stance demands a continuing questioning of the universality of Western science through anti-colonial and decolonial prisms. He goes further to assert the importance of community elders who are connected to local knowledges that inform knowledge truths and epistemologies. Colonialism has had and truly continues to have a global impact and direct outcomes on the people of the United States and Africa. The impact I will focus on is anti-Blackness in education broadly. For instance, from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organizations article titled Q&A, How Are African Countries Improving the Quality of Their Education, written in February of 2023, and I quote, an educated population provides a country with a more skilled workforce that participates more actively and meaningfully in economic and social development, and therefore contributes positively to society at large. Young, educated citizens are key to breaking the intergenerational cycle of poverty. However, sub-Saharan Africa has the world's largest out-of-school population, while the informal sector is responsible for 86% of all jobs. As was mentioned at the Transforming Education Summit, education today is in crisis in regard to equity and inclusion, quality, and relevance. Now, I ask you a couple of questions. What informs a perspective on a story? are narratives written? Who determines what's included or excluded from a story? Like, who gets to define poverty? Or what exactly is sub-Saharan Africa? And who determines that learning only happens in schools? American poet Reginald Dwayne Betts uses a technique called redaction to do what he calls moving norms, to restory previously published work that center on his lyrical exploration of Black realities in America. So I offer the employment of his redaction technique to restory the previous quote and focus on Black student achievement, African student advancement, and center Black liberation. Are we ready? An educated population provides a country with a more skilled workforce that participates more actively and meaningfully in economic and social development, and therefore contributes positively to society at large. Africa has the world's largest population responsible for education today in regard to equity and inclusion, quality, and relevance. Now I ask, what if Black liberation informed the perspective of the story? How are narratives written through a Black liberatory lens? When one centers Black liberation, how does that influence a story? U.S. education scholars must collaborate in culturally conscious ways with our colleagues in Africa and use the philosophies embedded in Black liberation to undergird sustainable partnerships. There is so much on the continent that is to be offered across this world, so much that U.S. educators and scholars can learn. In my personal and professional life, I've had the opportunity to learn, relearn, and in some ways, free-learn how to center Black liberation in my life, my teaching, and my scholarship. This, for me, is not just an intellectual activity. Rather, this is critical to my very survival and to yours, because my humanity is directly connected to your humanity. To undergird our time together today, I would like to explore liberation through the work of the Reverend Dr. James Cone. He suggests a way for us to think about liberation when he said, "Indeed, our survival and liberation depend upon our recognition of the truth when it is spoken and lived by the people. Truth is divine action entering our lives and creating the human action of liberation." Again, my humanity is directly connected to your humanity. In fact, I've always been exposed to seeking truth in Black liberatory thought and practices. Black liberation for me holds to three anchors. First, freedom. Second, collectivism. And third, ancestral knowing, that together compel you to actively engage in dismantling oppressive laws, practices, ways of knowing and being in this world. It is this approach to Black liberation that is embodied in my work and also in what I've been able to do both domestically and abroad. Bell Hooks, who is a Black feminist and distinguished professor, reminds us that looking back, Black women involve ourselves in a process whereby we see our history as a counter memory, using it as a way to know the present and invent the future. Since the history and current reality for so many people across our global society is rooted in a dominant ideology which regards Western ways of knowing and being as superior to other ways of knowing and being, I invite you to join me in centering Black liberation so that we may all envision a way for us to engage in sustainable collaborations that advance learning and development in culturally conscious ways. So, if I may, I'm I'm going to explore Black liberation as freedom, collectivism, and ancestral knowing by using my own counter-memory, as Bell Hooks noted, to invent a more liberatory future that rests for me and my collaborations with my colleagues in Ghana. Therefore, the central focus of this lecture is on using Black liberatory practices to advance international collaborations. It is through our collaborations and emphasis on liberatory work that allows us to center African indigenous knowledge in our global learning, to offer a worldview that centers Black liberation and promotes collaboration to achieve more equitable and prosperous society. I will explain why U.S. educators should collaborate in culturally conscious ways and embed their philosophies in Black liberation to undergird their sustainable partnerships. And finally, I will share my experiences with liberatory practices and global learning that have taken me on a personal and professional journey, allowing me to reflect on reimagining global learning every step of the way. My journey into global learning starts with acknowledging Black liberation as ancestral knowing, starting with my participation in the Ghana Study Abroad Education Program, which was a short-term program offered by my colleague, Dr. Cynthia Dillard, while I was on the faculty at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. There's a Ghanaian proverb that reads, "A man who pays respect to the great paves the way for his own greatness." It requires you to acknowledge those who have gone before you and respect the lessons you've learned from your predecessors. I'm thankful to my colleague, Dr. Cynthia Dillard, for paving the way for me. My engagement in her program highlighted for me the importance of hosting education abroad programs in Africa, the influence of study abroad education on graduate students, and the impact of these types of experiences for people who have ancestral connections to the African diaspora is truly invaluable. From that trip alone, one doctoral student conducted her dissertation research on Black student engagement in study abroad education, while another doctoral student immersed herself in a private university here in Ghana that served as a case study to learn about the alignment between their institutional mission and Ghanaian culture. So it goes without saying, study abroad education has regenerative legacies for those who engage in this type of learning. You cannot expect the unconventional by employing conventional measures. I'm gonna let that sit for just a minute. As educators, we should enact transformational practices and pedagogies. Often in higher education, we highlight that theory informs practice. I offer that view is a little too narrow. I'm not discarding the viewpoint, rather imploring you to consider an unconventional approach. Graduate education is thirsting for innovation. That innovation comes from an old friend, local indigenous knowledge that is informed by our ancestors. As we promote innovative research methods, we should engage more intently with local communities and incorporate those indigenous knowledges into our research methods. Ultimately, rewriting the textbooks on employing rigorous methodologies and promoting unconventional scholarship. Our graduate faculty and students must transform our theory development by relying more directly on locally informed practices. Simply put, enact the unconventional. My journey in global education involves engaging with Black liberation as collectivism. As you heard earlier, I had the opportunity to co-develop my own short-term study abroad program at the University of Maryland with my colleague, Dr. Jillian Martin, who is featured in the photo to the far right. We collaborated to develop a program that highlights Ghanaian higher education and focuses on decentering whiteness and Western-informed approaches to student affairs practice. We diligently work to contextualize higher education practice in the Ghanaian context with this program that targeted graduate students from across the U.S., higher education professionals, and faculty to prepare them to engage as actively, culturally conscious partners in global learning, global scholarship, and global pedagogy, using Ghanaian ways of knowing and being as our core philosophy. The Ghanaian proverb which notes that the rain wets the leopard's spots but does not wash them off, meaning you cannot change a person's true character regardless of how hard you try, comes to remind us that it's important not to repeat. It's important not to enter global spaces holding expectations from the global north and setting up transactional experiences with global partners that reinforce colonial harms and trauma on communities. Our program used project-based learning as an avenue to collaboratively engage with our Ghanaian higher education partners on project ideas that were generated by those partners. While decentering whiteness in global education spaces is important, my journey in global learning has awakened new lessons for me regarding the centrality of African, local, and indigenous knowledge. So then, what does decolonizing global learning mean for me in my scholarship and pedagogy? Well, it comes back to collaborations. Through a seed grant offered by the Office of International Affairs at the University of Maryland, I partnered with my colleague, Dr. Boyche Yadam, the now Director General of the Institute for Educational Planning and Administration, otherwise known IEPA, at the University of Cape Coast, to collaboratively bridge two courses from our higher ed graduate programs into a virtual global classroom. The course was initially designed to serve as a cross-cultural learning opportunity for master's students in project-based learning. However, over the 3 years of teaching the course, we shifted the curriculum to reflect on centering African indigenous knowledge while exploring theories and practices that were informed through Western ideologies. You see, we acknowledge that both our American-based and Ghanaian-based students wanted to learn multiple ways and a variety of practical educational approaches to learning. So I guess you can say we employed as a guide for the course curriculum what Paloma and Salanci would frame as critical hybridity, particularly noting it as a framework for examining how transnational interactions between the global north and the global south shape higher education development. My journey has allowed me to explore Black liberation as freedom. As illustrated in the Ghanaian proverb, if someone starts beating the edge of a drum, he, she, they will play it sooner. The proverb encourages one to start something and move gradually while being determined in facing life's challenges. During a global classroom session, a graduate student posed a question that intrigued me. She asked, where do we, as graduate students and practitioners, gain the opportunity to explore multiple ways of knowing and being? Her question has inspired my next point. As faculty, we should use our pedagogy to foster spaces which support their flourishing imaginations. Our graduate students are viable vessels, forging pathways to newly designed and sustainable approaches to scholarship. As faculty and administrators, we have a duty to nurture their imaginations, essentially helping to advance their freedom of thought and knowing. Our classrooms, both formally and informally, have the potential of squashing innovation by relying solely on traditional methods of teaching. Yet, we also have the potential of fostering educational environments that engage graduate students in exploring their creativity, challenging previously used methodology, and empowering them to craft new theories. As educators, we should foster those spaces, be open to the uncertainty in knowing, and employ transformative pedagogies. A critical element element of my global learning journey has highlighted for me the significance of maintaining sustainable partnerships and elevating the voices of my international partners. You see, one pole cannot build a house is the Ghanaian proverb that informs my commitment to sustainable partnerships with my global learning partners. Engaging in scholarship from manuscript to blog post, report development, grant proposals, and presenting academic papers at national and international conferences with graduate students and global faculty are just a few of the ways in which we sustain our partnerships. Particularly having the opportunity to publish in academic journals here in Ghana has been very rewarding to my graduate students and the global partners that we engage with. Our collaborations have allowed us to include African higher education professional associations like the Association of African Universities. Partnering with them has been invaluable in our work. My collaborators and I continue to elevate voices through our pre-COVID in-person annual colloquia, allowing us to engage in pressing issues with Ghanaian higher education professionals and U.S. higher education professionals, and through the incredibly successful Student Innovation Research Expo, which is hosted annually by IEPA in Cape Coast, Ghana, allowing emerging scholars to share their scholarship from across the country. My Fulbright research centered on restorative collaborations. The project included a participatory action research design to explore how Ghanaian faculty and practitioners are employing culturally conscious pedagogy that decenter ideologies informed by the global north in their contributions to the welfare of students in higher education, and how those norms shifted really during the global pandemic. Through an emphasis on Black liberatory practices as ancestral knowing, collectivism, and freedom, we really wanted to learn more about the application of African indigenous practices in Ghanaian higher education and how those practices have informed policy development, theory and philosophy development, pedagogical exploration, and curriculum development, using Ghanaian context as the center of our knowledge acquisition. I have been blessed to partner with an amazing team of fellow researchers, inclusive of elders and historians, graduate students with IEPA, the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, Student Services, professionals, and faculty with IEPA, and graduate students at the University of Maryland. Through our collective work, we have partnered in every aspect of our project. We have completed our initial data analysis and have had the opportunity to present some of those findings at a conference titled the Educational Association of South Africa's annual conference in Cape Coast just a couple of years ago. The latest evolutionary shift in my global learning journey through my Fulbright appointment with IEPA involved a more spiritual immersion and connection to engaging in learning from healing epistemologies, like the work of Dr. Moyo, that allowed me to explore the complex implications of coloniality and how those implications have caused harm, but how can we heal through this work and identify ways to center African indigenous knowledge as that pathway? My work through participatory action research includes the voice of local community elders, faculty, graduate students, and higher ed professionals that allow us to collectively expand on Professor Day's work and learn what cultural traditions and truths are being applied to support student development in college. In the words of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, forward ever, backward never. Our research research, scholarship, and teaching would be nothing without the communities we exist in. Our productivity in global learning, teaching, and scholarship must serve to aid and advance our communities. Now, the theory behind decolonizing education, research, and teaching recognizes the harm and trauma caused by claiming land and a people while also trying to erase culture from humans who were already free. The Ghanaian proverb, knowledge is like a baobab tree. No one can encompass it with their hands. Remind us that human wisdom is so great and audacious to believe that one person can claim to have mastered all of it. Imagining new, innovative ways of employing local knowledge is only as good as its ability to be productive, radically healing, and sustainable. Of course, our communities continue to reclaim their land and all associated measures, inclusive of people, ideologies, cultures, traditions, with or without higher education. Black liberation, however, allows us to leverage partnerships that engage in collectivism, draw on our ancestral knowledge, and empower new direction through the lens of freedom. Now, think of how effective we can be if we approach collaborations with our communities through a liberatory lens to implement sustainable, healing, transformative, decolonizing changes. Now that's productivity, that's partnership, that's Black liberation, that's centering African indigenous knowledge in global learning. I invite you to continue the conversation. As always, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues here at UPSA for their continued commitment to sustainable partnerships. I'd also like to express my appreciation to our colleagues here today and acknowledge their contributions to the broader canon of scholarship and innovation. Thank you for your meaningful and timely work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful lecture. Even though you told us how you were, whether there were some instances where you experienced culture clash and how you handled it.
Thank you for the question. That's a very important position to explore. Even though you have good intentions of bringing people together in the same space under the same guided goal, it doesn't necessarily mean we are all going to approach it from the same perspective. An example I offer is in teaching the global classroom. In the United States, we have done a lot of work around supporting gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender students in their development. In the classroom, where students in the United States have received this advanced kind of progressive education, if you will, in the same classroom with students from cultures and backgrounds where the discussion may not necessarily be on the table, there were times where, particularly around that topic, there were differences of opinion. In one case, my colleague and I, Dr. Boache-Yadam, did have to intervene and encourage the students to sit and talk about those differences and how they might be able to find ways of connection despite the ways in which they see their differences, right? And so it, I think, is around relationship building and encouraging people to not necessarily discount or discredit that which makes them different, but find ways in which they can connect so they can grow from those differences. So yes, coming together for collaborations is somewhat idealistic, but recognizing the hard work that goes into it is very important. Thank you.
Prof. My name is Adam Salifo, Business Admin Department. I would like to ask two questions. My first question relates to your work on pedagogy, teaching approaches. I would like you to share
some few ideas of clear differences you have experienced or found in your research between that of the sub-Saharan Africa, or in Ghana in particular, and the United States. That's my first question. My second question is in relation to this notion of black. Looking at the black or the global South versus the West. In your research and in your work, how do you deal with the significant diversity we even have even within black? Let's take Ghana for example. Ghana has over 100 ethnic groups. So how then do you juggle that by looking at that broader umbrella of black? Well, how do you deal with this whole diversity even within the context of the black?
Wow, this is a very tough question, my friend. I'll start with your first question. So a significant difference that I see just in the administration of higher education in Ghana versus in the US came out very directly in our interviews with faculty and staff at Ghanaian institutions around the nation. In the United States, we have a law. It's called FERPA, which is the Family, I'll be ashamed of myself. But essentially, it's the law that protects students from having their information released to anybody other than themselves. So essentially, a parent cannot go to a higher education institution and ask for information about their student, whether it's their grades, their health records, their performance in class. Simply because of this law, students are protected, depends on how you see that, from having others gather that information about them. In engaging with our colleagues here in Ghana, immediately in talking with them was the emphasis on family and how family are involved in the decisions of college students, their overall well-being and welfare, their mental wellness and being. Having learned from colleagues that if a student is expressing that they are not mentally well, that they will bring in family members to a counseling session, just blew our research team away. We were like, no, in the United States, that's simply not possible. But at the same time, learning the value in culture, right? And how culture informs why it's important to have your family be a part of those very necessary transitions. None of us have really reached adulthood when we get to college. None of us, inclusive of myself. It took many years, even after obtaining my undergrad degree, and I would even say my graduate degree, that I finally started to understand more about myself and my own decisions. But it takes your family and your network to help you do that. And so I think a distinguishing difference is in the United States, our students in many ways separated from that family structure the moment they come to college, and there are rules and laws protecting them that keep them from having that additional layer of support. To address the latter, there is a wealth of diversity within the African diaspora, period. And I think that because most areas have been impacted by colonialism, particular Western ideologies, we become so focused on what whiteness tells us to do that we don't explore the value and diversity that we have within our own communities. It's almost as if we want to be accepted into an ideology and way of being and knowing that truly was never designed to accept us. And And so I think if we have more of an opportunity to explore the rich diversity through language, through gender, through religion, through culture that exists within the African diaspora, and not place ourselves in the gaze. Toni Morrison talks about the white gaze, that they look upon us almost as if we are weird, we are odd, we are something to be studied. That gaze is not of interest to us. We should be more concerned about how can we find the variation within our own communities and learn from the different cultures and representations that we have amongst ourselves. I appreciate the question. Thank you.
As you were presenting, I was just thinking about the role of culture again and religion, or faith as you put it, in advancing international collaborations, or in using Black liberatory practices to advance it. In your study, did you come across anything? Because we are a very religious people, and it would be interesting to know how that impacted the research.
Thank you for the question. I think that was probably one of the most significant pieces that we did find in engaging with faculty and administrators here, are that not only are administrators led by their faith, but they operate under their faith in supporting students. A great example I offer is we spoke with an administrator who was very concerned about the well-being of a student during COVID-19 who was pregnant and unable to sit for her exams. In helping her to find the proper time and schedule to meet those exams, she became very anxious and she became very nervous about whether or not she would be able to move forward and, continue with her degree in a timely manner. That faculty member and administrator prayed with her on that day to encourage her to remove her anxiety and understand that for this very time and place, she was intended to do what she needed to do. Now, in the United States of America, that would be very difficult to do if you are not at a religiously affiliated institution. And what I learned in talking with that particular administrator is she felt compelled through her own faith practice, having noticed how nervous the student was, to be able to engage with her and tap into their faith together and understand how important that was to help her continue to move forward. So spirituality is very true and very rich in culture, and I think is a guiding principle actually, and how faculty, administrators, and staff support students here in Ghana. And it's something to be valued, not turned away from.
Will there be any risk when using Western framework to evaluate the success of Africa-led initiatives?
May I repeat it back to you to ensure I understood? Is the question, are there risks in using Western approaches when trying to advance African initiatives?
Yes, yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
The question is let me use the European accounting section as an example. Like when they use the European accounting section to maybe charge or measure our standard in this, like using the UPSA as an example and our accounting section. How do they have any effects? Like, or maybe like what I'm saying, the culture clashes,
Yes. So I think that there are some risks to only rely on Western ideologies. I think that there is value, as I indicated in my speech, in learning from different perspectives around the world. I teach a course at the University of Maryland for our doctoral students on on facilitating student learning. That course truly was focused on using only Western ways of teaching and knowing, and I took the course and created global modules so that we could learn from Confucianism, we can learn from African indigeneity, we can learn from some Western theories, right? That there is value in having that exposure. So yes, you run a risk in only looking at it from one way, but I will offer, because that's my worldview, I see the world through a multifaceted lens. There are some people in our society that do not see the world that way. They see it as a singular kind of one truth, a big T truth, right? And so when you engage with different worldviews, you have to take time to understand their perspective, just as you want them to hear your perspective. So there's value in it, but then there's also a caution to it. Thank you.
I am sure it has been a very insightful journey listening to Professor Candace M. I think two things that got me thinking. The first one is that in my religious understanding, if I feel the devil is worrying a student, I'll pray for him. In Ghana, there's no problem. There's no law. The second one is that if I pay your school fees, I should know what is happening to your grades. If there's a law that says I should not know how you are doing in school, then there should be a law that says I shouldn't pay your school fees. Cultural differences is very interesting. And it's important we look at it from different perspectives. So what you believe is the right way to go here, probably from somebody's perspective, totally different. I studied in China. One day, I saw them wearing red and tagging their vehicles red. In Ghana, it means somebody has died. Then I asked, who is dead? And they say, oh, when they are happy, they wear red. And when they are sad, they wear white. I say, no. You know that are sad is red. In Ghana, when we wear red and black, it's a serious matter. It's funeral. But the perspectives of culture guides the way we can collaborate and work with one another. If you have a very limited perspective, it will affect you and it will cause you to judge others negatively because of where they are coming from. I believe this morning's lecture has given us some insights about how Black liberation practices can help advance international collaborations. Whilst we're on student exchanges, faculty exchanges, research collaborations, we should also understand that there are appealing cultural practices that may differ from one person to the other. Notwithstanding that, we all need to work together as a people. And I believe that you are taking something out of this lecture to add to your wealth of knowledge. And we are grateful to Professor Candace M for such an insightful presentation this morning. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, we formally welcome the Administrator of the National Research Fund, Professor Abigail Okumensa. Until her recent appointment, she was the Director for our Research and Consultancy Center, and currently the Administrator for the National Research Fund. So students, if you want to do research and get free money, all those, make sure you see her. Okay? She has a lot of money to give to your research. She has a lot of money to give to research, not to donate. Our brothers are not rich. That's all. It's a national research fund. And more than 50% of that money directly comes to UPSC because it comes from us. Welcome you back to your home. And to everybody say thank you for your presence and believe that you need to take something out of this lecture. UPSA is going to have a very high drive of international students come next academic year. So don't expect that everybody eats fufu, bankum, and tusafi. Your cultural perspective may be different from another person's cultural perspective, but we need to work together as a team. Thank you very much.